Patience Kimball had been worth 3 horses, a wagon, and a rifle before her father settled for one mare, and a bottle of whiskey because his gambling debts demanded faster payment. The dust from the Wyoming Territory settlement of Republic hung in the air like shame itself as she stood in the town square that scorching afternoon in July of 1876, her hands trembling despite her effort to appear composed. The man who had acquired her, a grizzled trader named Silas Morton, examined her with the same calculating eye he had given the mare before deciding she would fetch a better price further west. Patience had turned 18 only 3 months prior, and in that short time, she had watched her father descend from struggling homesteader to desperate drunk. But she had never imagined he would trade away his only daughter to clear his debts. The rope around her wrist was rough hemp, tied loosely enough not to break skin but tight enough to remind her that she was property now, no different from the livestock being driven through the main street. Her brown hair hung in a tangled braid down her back, her calico dress faded and dusty from the journey into town. She kept her green eyes fixed on the horizon, refusing to look at the faces of the townspeople who pretended not to notice what was happening. Some injustices were too commonplace to warrant intervention in these hard times. "You will fetch me a pretty penny in Cheyenne," Silas muttered, more to himself than to her. "Young, healthy, strong back. Someone will want you for a wife or a worker." Patience said nothing. What was there to say? Her father had made his choice, signed whatever paper Silas had shoved in front of him, and then disappeared into the saloon without a backward glance. She had no mother, no siblings, no one to speak for her. The law saw her as her father's property until she married, and he had exercised his right to dispose of that property as he saw fit. The sound of hoofbeats approaching made Silas turn, and Patience allowed herself to glance up. A tall man was riding into town on a buckskin gelding, sitting easy in the saddle with the confidence of someone who had spent more time on horseback than on foot. He wore a dark brown hat that shaded his face, a dust-covered blue shirt, and well-worn leather chaps. A gun belt sat low on his hips, but his hands rested casually on the saddle horn as he surveyed the town with calm, observant eyes. Ethan Bennett had been driving cattle north from Texas to Montana for the past 5 years, and Republic was meant to be nothing more than a brief stop to resupply before pushing on. But the moment his gaze landed on the young woman with the rope around her wrist, standing beside a man who reeked of cruelty even from a distance, his plans changed. He guided his horse closer, his jaw tightening as he took in the scene. The woman's face was carefully blank, but he could see the barely suppressed fear in her eyes, the way her shoulders were pulled back in defiance even as her hands shook. She was young, probably not much past 18, and she had the look of someone who had been beaten down by circumstances but not yet broken. "That woman for sale?" Ethan asked, his voice low and controlled. He directed the question at Silas, though his eyes never left Patience's face. Silas grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "That she is, friend. Prime stock, young and strong. I am taking her to Cheyenne unless I get a good offer here." "What are you asking? $50 cash or trade value equivalent?" Ethan had planned to use his money to buy breeding stock for the ranch he was saving toward, but something in the woman's expression made him reach for the leather pouch at his belt without hesitation. $50 was more than she was worth by any reasonable measure, but it was less than the cost of his conscience if he rode away. "I will give you 40 and that mare," Ethan said, nodding toward a young chestnut mare he had acquired in a card game 2 towns back. She was a fine animal, worth at least $30 on her own. Silas's eyes gleamed with greed. "You have yourself a deal, Cowboy." The transaction took less than 5 minutes. Papers were signed with a shopkeeper serving as witness. Money and horse changed hands, and suddenly Patience found herself belonging to a complete stranger instead of to Silas Morton. She was not sure if her situation had improved or worsened. Ethan took the rope from Silas with distaste evident on his face, then turned to look at Patience fully for the first time. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, like storm clouds over the plains, and there was an unexpected gentleness in them that made her throat tighten. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. "Patience Kimball," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Patience." He nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory. "My name is Ethan Bennett. I am a cattle driver headed north to Montana. I have no use for slaves or servants, so here is what is going to happen. I am going to untie this rope, and you are going to be free to make your own choices." She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What? You heard me right." He began working at the knot, his calloused fingers surprisingly deft. "I bought you because I could not stand by and watch you be taken to Cheyenne for God knows what purpose. But I am not in the business of owning people. Soon as this knot comes free, you are your own woman." The rope fell away and Patience rubbed her wrist, still not quite believing what was happening. "I have nowhere to go. No money, no family who wants me, no prospects." Ethan's expression softened. "Then I have a proposition for you if you are willing to hear it. I am short a camp cook. The man who was supposed to make the drive with me broke his leg 3 days ago, and I have been eating my own terrible cooking ever since. The job pays $30 a month plus food and a safe place to sleep. When we get to Montana, you will have earned enough to start fresh wherever you want. But this is your choice, Patience. You can say no, and I will give you enough money to get yourself somewhere safe." She searched his face for deception, for hidden motives, but found only sincerity. This man, this stranger, was offering her something no one had given her in longer than she could remember a choice. More than that, he was offering her a chance to earn her own way, to reclaim some scrap of dignity. "I am not much of a cook," she admitted, "but I am a hard worker and I learn quickly." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, transforming his serious face into something warmer. "That is all I ask. We leave at first light tomorrow. There is a boarding house at the end of the street where you can get a room for the night. I will pay for it." "No." The word came out more sharply than she intended, and she softened her tone. "No, thank you. If I am to work for my wages, I should start now. I will sleep in your camp tonight and earn my keep properly." Respect flickered in Ethan's eyes. "Fair enough. My camp is about a mile north of town, near the creek. We will get you some supplies first." They walked through Republic together, leading his horse between them, and Patience was acutely aware of the curious stares following them. Ethan seemed oblivious to the attention, stopping at the general store to purchase a bedroll, a tin plate and cup, and a few other essentials. He paid without comment, then added a bolt of sturdy cotton fabric and a sewing kit to the pile. "For making a spare dress," he explained when she looked at him questioningly. "Working around a campfire is hard on clothes." The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught her off guard, and she had to blink rapidly to keep sudden tears from forming. She had grown so accustomed to being treated as less than human that simple kindness felt almost painful. They made their way out of town as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Ethan led them along a well-worn trail that followed the creek, pointing out landmarks and talking in an easy, unhurried way that slowly helped Patience relax. "How long have you been driving cattle?" she asked, partly out of genuine curiosity and partly to fill the silence. "Started when I was 15, working for other outfits. Been doing it on my own for the past 5 years, buying small herds and selling them north for profit. It is hard work, but I like the freedom of it, and I am close to having enough saved to buy my own ranch in Montana. That is the plan. There is good grazing land up there, room to build something lasting. I am tired of wandering. He glanced at her. What about you? What did you do before today? Patience hesitated, unused to anyone caring about her story. My mother died when I was 12. I helped my father with the homestead after that, cooking, cleaning, tending the garden and chickens. He was never much of a farmer, but he tried. Then about a year ago, he started drinking more, gambling. He lost most of our land piece by piece. This morning he told me we were coming to town to buy supplies. Instead, he sold me to pay his debts. Her voice remained steady as she recounted the facts, but Ethan could hear the hurt beneath the words. I am sorry that happened to you. You deserved better. What I deserve and what I get seem to be two different things, she said with a bitter edge. Then she shook her head. I am sorry. You have been kind to me, and here I am complaining. You are entitled to your feelings, Patience. What happened to you today was wrong, and you have every right to be angry about it. They reached his camp as twilight settled over the land. It was a simple setup, a small fire ring with a coffee pot and a Dutch oven. 2 bedrolls spread near enough to the fire for warmth but far enough for safety, and his saddle and gear arranged neatly under a canvas tarp. A string of 5 horses was picketed nearby, grazing contentedly. The cattle are in a box canyon about half a mile east, Ethan explained as he unsaddled his gelding. 20 head, all young steers, not a big herd but quality animals. They should fetch a good price in Montana. Patience set down her new bedroll and looked around uncertainly. What would you like me to cook for supper? There is bacon and beans in the pack, some hardtack, dried apples. Whatever you can make from that will be better than what I have been managing. He smiled at her again, and she felt something flutter in her chest that she firmly ignored. She busied herself with building up the fire and examining his supplies. They were basic but adequate, and she found herself falling into the familiar rhythm of preparing a meal. It felt good to have a purpose, to be doing something useful rather than being treated like cargo. As she worked, she was aware of Ethan moving around the camp, tending to his horses, checking his gear, occasionally glancing her way as if to make sure she was real. They ate together as stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, sitting on opposite sides of the fire. The beans were well seasoned, the bacon crispy, and Ethan ate with genuine appreciation. This is excellent, he said around a mouthful of food. You said you were not much of a cook. I said I was not much of a cook compared to my mother. She could make magic out of nothing. I just make food edible. Well, edible is a significant improvement over my attempts, so I consider myself fortunate. They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that did not need filling with empty words. Patience found herself studying Ethan when she thought he was not looking. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with strong features weathered by sun and wind, a straight nose and a firm jaw shadowed with a few days' worth of beard. His hands were scarred and calloused from hard work, but they moved with precision and care. There was something solid about him, dependable, like he was a man who kept his promises. Where will you go? Ethan asked eventually. After Montana, I mean, when you have your wages saved up. Patience had not allowed herself to think that far ahead. I do not know. Maybe find a town that needs a seamstress or a cook, somewhere I can build a quiet life. You do not want to marry? The question was casual, but it made her stiffen. Not anymore. I thought marriage was supposed to be a partnership, but I watched my father treat my mother like his property, and then he went and sold me like livestock. I would rather be alone than belong to someone. Marriage should not mean belonging to someone, Ethan said quietly. It should mean choosing to belong with someone. There is a difference. Maybe, but I have not seen much evidence of it. He nodded, accepting her perspective without argument. Fair enough. But I hope you get the chance to see it someday, to know that not all men are like your father or Silas Morton. You are not like them, she found herself saying. You could have used me however you wanted after you bought me. No one would have stopped you, but you gave me a choice instead. Why? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. My mother was in a situation similar to yours once, before she met my father. Her first husband was a cruel man who treated her badly. When he died, his brother tried to claim her as part of the estate. My father, who was working as a ranch hand at the time, helped her escape. He gave her a choice to marry him and he would protect her, or he would help her start over somewhere else. She chose to marry him, and they spent 30 happy years together before a fever took them both when I was 22. They sound like good people. They were the best. They taught me that how you treat others, especially those who cannot fight back, defines who you are. So when I saw you standing there with that rope around your wrist, I heard my father's voice in my head asking me what kind of man I wanted to be. Patience felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. Well, for what it is worth, I think you are a good man, Ethan Bennett. He met her eyes across the flames, and something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, or the first fragile thread of trust. Get some rest, Patience Kimball. We have a long journey ahead of us. She settled into her new bedroll, staring up at the vast expanse of stars overhead. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt something that might have been hope. The journey north began at dawn. Ethan had Patience ride one of his spare horses, a gentle gray mare named Silver, while he worked the cattle. She watched him with growing admiration as he expertly guided the herd, anticipating their movements, keeping them bunched and moving in the right direction. It was clear he loved what he did, that he understood these animals and respected them. Her job was to ride ahead and scout for a good place to stop for the midday rest, then prepare a quick meal while Ethan watched the herd. In the evenings, she would make camp while he secured the cattle, and they would eat together under the stars, talking about everything and nothing. As the days passed, Patience found herself relaxing in ways she had not thought possible. Ethan treated her with consistent respect, never standing too close, never touching her without permission, never making her feel like the transaction in Republic gave him any rights over her. He asked her opinion on which routes to take, listened when she talked about her dreams of learning to read better, and shared stories of his travels that made her laugh. There was this one time in Abilene, he said one evening as they sat by the fire, when a steer got loose in the middle of town and ran straight into the saloon. By the time we caught him, he had destroyed 3 tables, broken a mirror, and somehow managed to drink half a glass of whiskey someone left unattended. You are making that up, Patience accused, but she was grinning. I swear on my mother's grave, every word is true. The bartender tried to charge us for the whiskey, said the steer looked like he enjoyed it. Her laughter rang out across the prairie, bright and unrestrained, and Ethan found himself wanting to hear that sound as often as possible. Somewhere along the trail, his feelings for her had shifted from protective concern to something deeper, something that made his heart beat faster when she smiled at him. But he kept those feelings to himself. She had been through enough without him complicating things, by confessing that he was falling in love with her. Patience was having similar thoughts. She caught herself watching for Ethan's return each evening with an eagerness that had nothing to do with hunger for supper. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle tone he used with his horses, the careful way he banked the fire each night to make sure she stayed warm. He made her feel safe, but more than that, he made her feel valued, seen. They had been on the trail for 2 weeks when trouble found them. It was mid-afternoon, and they had stopped near a stream to water the cattle. Patience was refilling their canteens when she heard horses approaching fast. She looked up to see 3 men riding toward their camp, hard-faced and armed. Ethan, who had been checking one of the steer's hooves, straightened and moved to position himself between Patience and the strangers. "Afternoon," the lead rider called out. He was a thick-set man with a scar running down his left cheek. "Nice herd you got there." "Appreciate that," Ethan replied evenly. "We are just passing through, no trouble intended." "No trouble at all," Scarface agreed with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "But see, we have been having issues with rustlers in this area. Thought we should check your bill of sale, make sure these cattle are legally yours." It was a transparent attempt at intimidation, but Ethan remained calm. "Papers are in my saddlebag. I will get them for you." He moved slowly, keeping his hands visible, and retrieved the documents. Scarface made a show of examining them, though Patience doubted he could actually raid. "These look in order," he finally said. "But there is a toll for passing through this territory. 10 head of cattle ought to cover it." "There is no toll through open range," Ethan said, his voice hardening slightly. "And you are not the law." The other 2 riders shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward their guns. The tension ratcheted up instantly, and Patience felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "Now, friend, there is no need for things to get unpleasant," Scarface said. "We are just businessmen, same as you, 10 head, and we will escort you safely through our territory." "I think we will take our chances without your escort," Ethan replied. His hand hovered near his gun, not quite touching it, but ready. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Scarface shrugged. "Your funeral, Cowboy, but do not say we did not warn you when things go bad for you out here." The 3 men wheeled their horses and rode off, but Patience could feel their threat hanging in the air like smoke. "We need to move," Ethan said urgently. "Get everything packed now. We are not stopping until we put some serious distance between us and them." They broke camp in record time, and Ethan pushed the herd hard for the rest of the afternoon. Patience rode beside him, keeping watch on their back trail, but saw no sign of pursuit. Still, the encounter had shaken her, reminded her how vulnerable they were out here. As darkness fell, Ethan finally allowed them to stop in a small depression that provided some cover. They made a cold camp with no fire, eating jerky and hardtack in silence. "Will they come back?" Patience asked quietly. "Maybe. Probably. Men like that do not take no for an answer easily." He looked at her, his expression serious. "I need you to promise me something. If they show up and things go bad, you take Silver and you ride hard for the next town. Do not look back, do not wait for me, just go. I am not leaving you to fight them alone." "Patience, no." Her voice was firm. "You gave me back my dignity, Ethan. You made me feel like a human being again. I am not repaying that by running away when you need help." Something shifted in his expression, a combination of frustration and admiration. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met." "Good. Then we understand each other." Despite the danger, Ethan found himself smiling. "We should take turns keeping watch tonight. I will go first." "Wake me in a few hours," Patience agreed. She settled into her bedroll, but sleep eluded her. Every sound made her tense, and she was acutely aware of Ethan sitting a few feet away, rifle across his knees, watching the darkness. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and she drifted into an uneasy sleep. She woke to Ethan's hand on her shoulder and his voice in her ear. "They are here. 3 of them coming from the east. Stay low." Patience's heart leaped into her throat as she heard the sound of approaching horses. The moon was up, providing just enough light to see three dark shapes riding toward their camp. "Bennett," Scarface's voice rang out. "We know you are there. Last chance to make this easy. Give us the cattle and we will let you and your woman live." Ethan stood, using their packs as cover. "The cattle stay with me. Turn around and ride away and nobody has to get hurt. You are outnumbered, Cowboy. Be smart about this." "I am being smart." "You are the ones making a mistake." There was a moment of tense silence, and then one of the riders reached for his gun. Ethan was faster. His shot rang out and the man fell from his saddle with a cry of pain, clutching his shoulder. The other two scattered, seeking cover behind rocks and brush. Patience grabbed Ethan's rifle and aimed it in the direction of the attackers, her hands surprisingly steady despite her fear. She had learned to shoot hunting rabbits with her father, though she had never aimed at a person before. "I have got the left side," she called to Ethan. He shot her a quick look of surprise but nodded. "Watch for movement. They will try to circle around." For several long minutes nothing happened. Then Patience caught a flash of movement to her left. She fired, not aiming to kill but to warn, and was rewarded with a curse and the sound of someone scrambling back behind cover. "The woman can shoot," one of the attackers yelled. "This is not worth it, Clay." There was more shouting, and then the sound of horses retreating. Patience and Ethan remained in position for a long time, hardly daring to breathe until they were certain the danger had passed. "They are gone," Ethan finally said, lowering his gun. "You all right?" Patience was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, but she nodded. "I am fine. You?" "Fine." He moved to her side and without thinking he pulled her into his arms. She went willingly, pressing her face against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart that matched her own. "You were incredibly brave," he murmured into her hair. "I was terrified," she admitted. Brave is not about not being scared. It is about doing what needs to be done even when you are scared. He pulled back slightly to look at her face. "Thank you for standing with me." In the moonlight, his eyes were dark and intense, and Patience felt that flutter in her chest again, stronger this time. She realized she was falling for this man, this unexpected savior who treated her like an equal, who trusted her with a rifle at his side, who held her like she was something precious. "We should move," Ethan said reluctantly, releasing her. "They might come back with reinforcements." They traveled through the night, putting miles between themselves and the attack site. By dawn, they were both exhausted, but Ethan wanted to keep going. They finally stopped near midday, finding a spot with good visibility where they could see anyone approaching from a long distance. Patience made coffee and warmed up some beans while Ethan tended to the horses and checked the herd. When she called him to eat, he sank down beside her with a weary sigh. "I am sorry I put you in danger," he said quietly. "You did not put me in danger. Those men made their own choices. And I made mine when I decided to work for you." She poured him coffee and pressed the hot tin cup into his hands. "Besides, I would rather face danger at your side than be safe and alone." He looked at her searchingly. "Patience, I need to tell you something." Her heart started to pound. "What?" "I know I have no right to feel this way, not after everything you have been through, and I will understand if you want to part ways when we reach Montana. But I cannot keep this to myself anymore." He set down his cup and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you standing in that town square with your chin up and fire in your eyes despite everything. I want you to know that you are not just my employee. You are not someone I bought. You are a brave, strong, remarkable woman, and it would be the greatest honor of my life if you would consider letting me court you properly." Patience felt tears stinging her eyes, but they were good tears this time. "I am falling in love with you too, Ethan. I did not think I could feel this way about anyone, did not think I could trust a man again, but you have shown me what it means to be treated with respect and kindness. You have given me back myself." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "May I kiss you?" "Yes." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she met him halfway. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and new beginnings. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. "So I take it you are agreeable to being courted?" Ethan asked, his forehead resting against hers. "Very agreeable." They spent the rest of the day in a haze of happiness, stealing glances at each other, finding excuses to stand close. That night, with Ethan's arm around her shoulders and her head on his chest, Patience felt a peace she had never known. The remainder of the journey to Montana passed in a blur of long days and starlit nights. Ethan and Patience grew closer with each passing mile, learning each other's habits and quirks, sharing dreams and fears. He taught her to rope a steer and read trail signs. She taught him the songs her mother used to sing and how to make biscuits that did not taste like hardtack. They reached the town of Billings, Montana, in late September, with the cattle in good condition and their relationship deepening into something that felt permanent and right. Ethan sold the herd for a substantial profit, enough to make a down payment on the land he had been eyeing. That evening, in the small hotel where they had taken separate rooms for propriety's sake, Ethan knocked on Patience's door holding a small wooden box. "I have something for you," he said when she opened the door. Inside the box were $360, $30 for each month she had worked, even though it had only been just over 2 months. "This is too much," Patience protested. "It is exactly what I promised you. A fresh start, enough to go anywhere and do anything you want." He took a deep breath. "But before you make any decisions, I want to ask you something." He dropped to one knee right there in the hallway, and Patience's hands flew to her mouth. "Patience, Kimball, I know we have not known each other long, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, I respect you. I want to build a life with you, not as my property, but as my partner, my equal in all things. Will you marry me?" "Yes." The word burst from her before he had even finished the question. "Yes, Ethan, 1,000 times yes." He stood and swept her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and passion he had been holding back, and she responded with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. "We will do this right," Ethan promised. "A proper wedding, a real home, everything you deserve." They were married a week later in a small church in Billings, with the minister's wife and the hotel owner serving as witnesses. Patience wore a new dress made from the fabric Ethan had bought her in Republic, and she carried wildflowers that Ethan had ridden out at dawn to pick. She had never felt more beautiful or more loved. The land Ethan purchased was a beautiful stretch of valley with a creek running through it and mountains rising in the distance. They spent the fall building a small but sturdy cabin, working side by side to create their home. Patience planted a vegetable garden and started a flock of chickens, while Ethan built corrals and began acquiring breeding stock for what would become the Bennett Ranch. Their first winter was hard, with bitter cold and deep snow, but they kept each other warm, talking long into the night about their plans for the future. Patience had never imagined she could be this happy, that she could wake up each morning beside a man who valued her thoughts and contributions as much as he valued her love. Spring brought new life to the ranch and to their marriage. Patience discovered she was expecting a child in July, and Ethan was beside himself with joy. He fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and work less, until she had to remind him that she was pregnant, not fragile. "I cannot help it," he said, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "You are carrying the most precious thing in the world to me, you and our baby." Their son was born in early August of 1877, a healthy boy with his father's eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Thomas, after Ethan's father, and he became the center of their world. Patience had worried she would not know how to be a good mother, but Ethan reminded her that she had already shown more love and courage than most people ever would. As little Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Ethan proved to be as skilled at breeding cattle as he was at driving them, and their herd grew steadily. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, good men who respected Patience as the lady of the ranch, rather than questioning her authority. When Thomas was 2 years old, Patience gave birth to twin girls, Elizabeth and Emma, who had their mother's green eyes and their father's stubborn streak. The cabin that had seemed spacious for 2 felt cramped with 5, so Ethan spent the next summer building an addition, creating separate bedrooms for the children and a larger kitchen for Patience. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ethan gave Patience a leather-bound journal and a set of good pens. "For writing down our story," he explained. "So our children will know how their mother was the bravest, strongest woman in Montana, and how their father was the luckiest man alive." Patience kissed him, this man who had given her back her dignity and his heart, and silently thanked whatever providence had brought them together. "Our story is not finished yet," she reminded him. "No," he agreed, pulling her close. "It is only just beginning." Over the years, their family continued to grow. A 4th child, another son named Jacob, arrived when the twins were 3. The ranch expanded as well, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Patience proved to have a head for business, keeping meticulous records and managing their finances with skill that impressed even the bankers in Billings. But no matter how busy they became, Ethan and Patience always made time for each other. Every evening, after the children were in bed, they would sit on the porch and talk, sharing the details of their days, making plans, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence with their hands linked. Patience never forgot where she had come from, the girl who had been traded for a horse in a dusty Wyoming town. Sometimes she would touch her wrist where the rope had been and marvel at how far she had come. She had taken that trauma and transformed it into purpose, using her experience to help other women in difficult situations. When a neighboring rancher tried to sell his 15-year-old daughter to pay gambling debts, Patience heard about it and immediately rode out to intervene. She offered the man enough money to clear his debts in exchange for custody of the girl, then gave the young woman a job at the Bennett Ranch and a safe place to live. The girl, whose name was Sarah, eventually married one of their ranch hands and started a family of her own on adjacent land. It became known throughout the territory that the Bennett Ranch was a place where women in trouble could find help. Patience and Ethan took in several more young women over the years, giving them work, teaching them skills, helping them build independent lives. Some moved on, some stayed, but all of them carried with them the knowledge that they had worth beyond what any man might try to claim. Thomas grew into a serious young man who loved working with the cattle and had his father's gift for understanding horses. The twins were inseparable, adventurous girls who could outride most of the ranch hands by the time they were 12. Jacob was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book when he could get his hands on one. Patience taught all of her children to read and write, something she had continued to improve at herself over the years. Ethan built them a small schoolhouse on the property and hired a teacher to give them a proper education. He was determined that his children would have opportunities and choices. "You never know when someone might try to take advantage of you," he told them seriously. "Your mother and I want you to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, to never be dependent on anyone who might use that dependence against you. The children knew the story of how their parents met, though Patience had softened some of the harsher details for their young ears. They knew their mother had been in a difficult situation, and their father had helped her, that their love had grown from mutual respect and admiration. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Patience with a trip back to Republic. She had not set foot in the town since the day he had bought her freedom, and she was not sure she wanted to return. But Ethan insisted there was something he needed to show her. They left the children with their most trusted ranch hand and his wife, and made the journey south. Republic had grown in the past decade, with new buildings lining the main street and a railroad spur bringing increased commerce. But the general store and the saloon were still there, familiar landmarks from that terrible day. Ethan led her to a new building on the edge of town, a modest structure with a sign reading Republic Women's House. Inside, they found a clean, well-appointed boarding house run by the minister's widow, providing safe, affordable housing for women in need. "I have been sending money to help fund this place for the past 3 years," Ethan explained. "After seeing what you did for Sarah and the others, I wanted to make sure other women had options too. I talked to the minister before he passed, and he helped set it up." Patience was crying now, overwhelmed by the realization that Ethan had been quietly working to help women like she had been, without ever seeking recognition or praise. "You are the best man I have ever known," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I am just trying to live up to the example you set," he replied, pulling her into his arms. "You turned your pain into purpose, your suffering into strength. You inspire me every day." They stayed in Republic for a week, and Patience spent time talking to the women at the boarding house, sharing her story, offering encouragement. She met a young woman who reminded her so much of her younger self that it was almost painful, the same wary eyes, the same defensive posture, the same barely suppressed hope that things could get better. "They can get better," Patience told her earnestly. "I know it feels impossible right now, but you are stronger than you think. You have survived this far, which means you can survive whatever comes next, and you do not have to do it alone." Before they left, Patience donated a substantial sum to the women's house, enough to ensure it could continue operating for years to come. She also arranged for the women there to have access to education and job training, determined to give them the tools they needed to build independent lives. On the ride back to Montana, Patience reflected on the strange turns life could take. She had been traded like livestock in that town, but now she was returning as a successful rancher, a respected community member, a woman who had transformed her darkest moment into a mission to help others. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, noticing her pensive expression. "I am thinking about how grateful I am that you rode into Republic that day, how different my life would have been if you had passed through an hour earlier or later." "I was thinking about that too," Ethan admitted. "But I do not think it was chance, Patience. I think we were meant to find each other. You were meant to show me what real courage looks like, and I was meant to help you see your own worth." "We saved each other," Patience said softly. "Yes, we did." Their children grew and thrived. Thomas took over more of the daily ranch operations as Ethan's hair began to gray, proving himself to be as capable and fair-minded as his father. The twins, despite their wild spirits, developed into accomplished horsewomen who helped break and train the ranch's horses. Jacob did eventually leave the ranch to attend college back east, but he wrote letters home faithfully and returned every summer with his head full of new ideas. Patience and Ethan became grandparents when Thomas married a schoolteacher from Billings, and they had a son. The twins both married as well, each choosing men who treated them as equals and partners. Jacob brought home a wife who was as bookish as he was, and they settled on a small piece of Bennett land where they raised sheep and children in equal measure. Through it all, Ethan and Patience remained devoted to each other. Their love had not dimmed with time but had deepened, maturing into something richer and more complex than those first heady days of courtship. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle disease and market crashes, the joys and sorrows of raising children. Through it all, they had stood together, equal partners in every sense. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that drew people from all over the territory. The Bennett Ranch had become known not just for quality cattle, but for the integrity of its owners, for the way they treated their employees fairly and helped their neighbors in times of trouble. At one point during the celebration, Patience found herself standing with Ethan on their porch, watching their children and grandchildren playing in the yard, and she was struck by the sheer improbability of it all. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if Silas Morton had taken me to Cheyenne that day?" she asked quietly. Ethan wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her close. "I try not to. The thought of you suffering that fate while I rode past is unbearable. But that is not what happened. You stopped. You gave me a choice. You gave me back my life. And you gave me a reason to settle down, to build something permanent. Before I met you, I was just drifting, saving money without really knowing what I was saving for. You gave me purpose." She leaned her head on his shoulder, still marveling at how perfectly they fit together. "We have built a good life, haven't we?" "The best life," he confirmed. "Better than I ever imagined possible." As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Patience felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had survived being traded for a horse, had endured the degradation and fear of that dark time. But she had also found love in its truest form, had built a family and a legacy, had helped other women find their own paths to freedom and dignity. Years continued to pass, bringing with them the small joys and sorrows of life. Ethan's knee began to trouble him from all those years in the saddle, and Patience developed arthritis in her hands that made the fine sewing she loved more difficult. But they adapted, helping each other through the challenges of aging with the same partnership that had defined their marriage from the beginning. Thomas took over running the ranch completely when Ethan was 60, allowing his parents to finally slow down. But neither of them could fully retire. Ethan still consulted on major decisions and spent hours with his grandchildren, teaching them everything he knew about horses and cattle. Patience continued her work with women in need, though she did most of it through letters and donations now, rather than direct intervention. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The family had grown so large that they had to hold the celebration in the barn, and people came from 3 states to honor the couple who had become something of a legend in Montana. During the party, their oldest granddaughter asked Patience to tell the story of how she and Ethan had met. Patience glanced at her husband, seeing the same love in his eyes that had been there 50 years ago, and began to speak. She told them about Republic, about the rope around her wrist, about the stranger on a buckskin horse who had seen her worth when she could barely see it herself. She talked about the journey north, about learning to trust again, about building a partnership based on mutual respect. She spoke honestly about the hard times and the good times, about how love was not just a feeling but a choice you made every day. "Your grandfather gave me back my dignity," she said, looking around at all the faces watching her. "But more importantly, he showed me that I had never really lost it. It was always there, inside me, waiting for someone to recognize it, and once I saw it in his eyes, I could see it in myself. "And what did grandmother give you?" one of the younger grandchildren asked Ethan. He stood and moved to Patience's side, taking her hand with the same gentleness he had shown that first night in camp. "She gave me everything. Purpose, family, love, a reason to be the best man I could be. I rode into Republic looking for supplies, and I found the other half of my soul." The family erupted in applause and happy tears, and Patience felt Ethan squeeze her hand. They had told their story dozens of times over the years, but it never got old. It was their story, their truth, their testament to the transformative power of choosing love and respect over cruelty and exploitation. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Patience and Ethan found themselves alone on their porch once more, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched over them on that first journey north, the same stars that had witnessed every triumph and trial of their 50 years together. "You have any regrets?" Patience asked softly. Ethan considered the question seriously, as he always did when she asked him something. "I regret that you had to suffer before we found each other. I regret every moment of pain you endured, but I cannot regret the path that led us here because it gave us this life, these children, this love. I feel the same way. I would not wish my experiences on anyone, but they made me who I am. They taught me to value freedom and dignity, to stand up for others who cannot stand up for themselves, and they led me to you. We have done good work, you and I," Ethan said, looking out over the ranch they had built together. "Not just with the cattle and the land, but with the lives we have touched. Sarah and her family, all those women from the boarding house who went on to build good lives, our children and grandchildren, who know that every person has inherent worth regardless of their circumstances." "That is our legacy," Patience agreed. "Not the ranch or the money, but the kindness we have put into the world." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own memories. Finally, Ethan stood and offered his hand to Patience. "Dance with me," he said. "There is no music." "There is always music when I am with you." She let him pull her to her feet, and they swayed together on the porch, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. This was how they had danced at their wedding 50 years ago and at countless celebrations since. But it was also how they had danced on quiet evenings when the children were small and asleep, when they needed to reconnect after a difficult day, when words were not enough to express what they felt. "I love you, Patience Bennett," Ethan murmured. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you in that town square, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too, Ethan. You are my heart, my home, my everything." They danced until the moon rose high overhead, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, when they needed it most. The girl who had been traded for a horse had become a woman of strength and substance, a matriarch whose influence would ripple through generations. The cowboy who had given her a choice had found in her the partner who made all his dreams possible. As they finally made their way inside, Patience took one last look at the land they had built their life on. The ranch stretched out in all directions, prosperous and peaceful. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear cattle lowing and horses nickering in their corrals, the sounds of the life they had created together. She thought about the girl she had been, standing in that dusty town square with a rope around her wrist, and she wanted to tell that girl that everything would be all right, more than all right. That she would find love and purpose, that she would raise children and help others, that she would build a legacy of dignity and respect. That the worst day of her life would ultimately lead to the best days of her life. But that girl was gone now, transformed through love and partnership into the woman she was meant to be. And in her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who had claimed her dignity and never let it go, who had loved and been loved in return. Ethan and Patience lived another decade together, each day a gift they never took for granted. They passed peacefully within months of each other, both in their sleep, both with hands linked even in death as they had been in life. Their children buried them on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under a single headstone that read simply, "Together in life, together in eternity." The Bennett Ranch continued for generations, but it was more than just a cattle operation. It became a symbol of what could be built when two people chose to see the best in each other, to lift each other up, to face the world as equal partners. The women's boarding house in Republic operated for nearly 100 years, helping countless women find their footing and their freedom. And every year on the anniversary of that day in July, when a cowboy rode into town and changed a young woman's life forever, the Bennett family gathered to tell the story. They told it to remind themselves that every person has inherent worth and dignity, that small acts of kindness can change the course of history, that love built on respect and equality can withstand any challenge. The story of how Patience was traded for a horse, and how a cowboy named Ethan gave her back her dignity and his heart, became part of Montana legend. But for those who knew them, who loved them, who carried their legacy forward, it was so much more than a story. It was proof that even in the hardest times, in the wildest places, humanity and love could triumph. It was a reminder that one person's choice to do the right thing could ripple outward in ways they might never fully comprehend. And it was a love story for the ages, one that began with an ending and ended with a beginning, one that proved beyond any doubt that true love was not about possession or transaction, but about seeing another person fully and choosing to walk beside them as an equal. The cowboy and the woman he freed had built something that lasted far beyond their own lives, a testament to the transformative power of dignity, respect, and love.